Let me say happy Mother's Day to the mothers among us and to those who are tuning in as well. Indeed, God's design is that mothers are a blessing to their children, and it is right that we show appreciation for mothers. And for some, Mother's Day, I understand, is uncomfortable. For some, maybe your mother has passed on, and I'm sorry if that is the case. Certainly cherish the memories of your mother. For others, it could be that just the relationship with mom was not good. And again, if that is the case, I'm sorry that that is the case. Maybe there were others who stepped up in life and were mothering type figures in those kinds of situations, and we can certainly be focused on them and be thankful for them. I want us to spend our time today in the early part of the book of Exodus. So if you want to open your Bible to Exodus chapter 1 and chapter 2 will be where we will focus. And in the text, there are four women who were all very influential in the life of Moses. Now, obviously, only one of them was his biological mother, but there are three others who played a very big role in his life. And they were he was special to them, and presumably vice versa. And each in their own way, they demonstrated their love and their care for him, and all this to nurture him and develop him so that he would become the man of God that he did to lead Israel away from Egyptian captivity and to the doorstep of the promised land. We'll start with a little bit of backdrop to what's going on in the text here. So at the end of Genesis, during the time of famine throughout the whole land, Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. Of course, Joseph is already in Egypt. He had gone there as a slave, and yet God had blessed him while he was in Egypt, and he actually rose up to be the second most powerful individual in the land. Only Pharaoh was more powerful than Joseph. And so Jacob moves his family there, and Joseph, with Pharaoh's approval, sets his family into the land of Goshen. Goshen is part of Egypt, but it's not tucked in close with the rest of the Egyptians. They were sort of set off by themselves, which was helpful for them as a people. Jacob died. Joseph and his brothers died. And eventually, we're told in Exodus 1 and verse 8, there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So the Pharaoh who was in power when Joseph was there, he had already died. And the one who took over for him, he knew of Joseph as well. And so we're talking the next Pharaoh after that, who did not know Joseph. And this Pharaoh, not only did he not know Joseph, but he didn't know about the God of Joseph either. The one who was there when Joseph saved the nation from the famine, he knew about God. We see him talking about God at times. His replacement, I don't know how much he knew about God, but he knew about Joseph. But then the next one, he knows neither Joseph nor God. But what we do find is that he fears the people of Israel. He sees these people off in Goshen who are growing and growing and growing. They are becoming very populous. They are becoming very mighty. And the text reveals he is afraid that they might overthrow us. They might rise up, and so he is concerned about this. We need to afflict them. We need to threaten them and oppress them and enslave them, and we don't want them rising up against Egypt. In verse 12, it says, the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were in dread of the children of Israel. That plan didn't work. And so history tells us that the Pharaoh who brought the cruel oppression against the Hebrews, he passed away. And his replacement who came in was worse than him. His replacement is the one who in Exodus talks to the Hebrew midwives and expects them to kill every male child who is born to the Hebrew women. There's a couple of great names to remember. If you want to remember some Bible names, Shiphrah and Puah, two women who have just outstanding character and devotion to God and are not afraid of the king. They have the most powerful man, not just in the country. At this point, he is the most powerful man in the world, likely, because Egypt is a world power, the world power. And he has come to them and told them, you need to kill every male child that is born among the Israelites. And because of their faith in God and their determination to do what is right, they do not. In fact, we're told in verse 17, the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the male children alive. That's actually a proactive statement. It's not just they did not do something, they saved the children alive. Through their efforts, many young children, male children, were kept alive. And Pharaoh actually asked them about their disobedience. That why have you done this? Why have you not done what the king has told you to do? Why are you letting the children live? And in verse 19, the explanation is given. It says, the midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. There's no long labor process among the Israelite women. Now, I don't know that that was always the case. What I suspect has happened here is that God has intervened. There are some commentators who will say of this that, well, they lied to Pharaoh in order to defend what they were doing. I don't believe that they lied to Pharaoh. What I think is happening is that God is honoring their decision not to obey Pharaoh, but rather to be devoted to him and to his people. And as such, God has worked the circumstances so that the Hebrew women are giving birth very swiftly. And so, they can't be held accountable because they couldn't get there on time. For some reason, the Hebrew women are giving birth very fast right now. And in fact, verse 20 explains God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became great and mighty. So these midwives are special people. Obviously, they love children, and they love the miracle of childbirth, and they have a passion for helping people and for being there for people. And though the midwives were not part of the family, there's no indication that these are aunts of Moses or anything of that nature. They're not part of the family, but I've read many accounts concerning midwives, both modern midwives and ancient midwives. And the indication is time and again that they are like family, that they develop very close relationships with the families that they are working with and become a great support for the mother and an encouragement to her. And so these women cherish the lives of children and were not willing to do harm. And Moses happened to be among those that they were able to save alive. And so although the children were not theirs, they loved the process, they loved children, they loved childbirth, and were intimately involved with mother and child. And so they are to be commended for the role that they had played. Again, they're not mothers, at least not mothers of Moses, but they are women who had great love for children. Now, let's move on and talk about Moses' mother. So eventually what happens is Pharaoh decides he needs to bypass the midwives. They're not doing what I want them to do. They've got an explanation, but what I want to happen is not happening. And so take a look at Exodus chapter 1 and at verse 22. And let me suggest to you, we're going to ignore that big number 2 that's in the book. So the chapter division where chapter 2 begins, one verse later, we're going to ignore that. We're just going to start at verse 22 and read for a few verses. Verse 22, it says, So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, Every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. So we have in verse 22 the new edict that has been given, and he's bypassing the midwives. He's going to his own people. And so whether this is soldiers or whether this is every Egyptian or who exactly this was given to, it might be very widespread. But the command is given, every son who is born among the Israelites you will cast into the river. And then 2 verses later, we have a woman who has given birth to a son. Well, everybody's out to get him. And she needs to and wants to keep him protected. This is the awful situation or circumstance surrounding Moses' birth. She has given birth to a son and people want him dead. Now, she has 2 children already. She's already given birth to a girl, likely about 7 years prior to this, 8 years prior to this. And she has given birth to a boy about 3 years earlier than this. The command to kill all Hebrew babies came after Aaron's birth, but before Moses' birth. And Miriam, of course, is the older sister. And they're okay with her staying alive. But now we have a beautiful baby boy, a boy who by decree of Pharaoh is to be killed immediately. But Moses' parents will not comply. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to hide the child. If anyone knows about the child at all, then he's dead. And so they hid the child. For 3 months, they hid the child until it became too difficult to hide the baby boy. Now, I think sometimes we get the wrong picture here, that she's at home and just hiding out in a corner of the house or something of that nature. Do you think that Hebrew slaves were granted maternity leave? I don't think so. Understand, the slaves were not just the men. The slaves were the men and the women. They might have different duties, but they are all out there expected to work. And so she's not at home. I don't think that that's the case at all. She likely worked right up to the time of delivery, and then she gave birth to the child, and then very, very quickly afterward, so as to not draw any attention to herself, because, I wonder if she even hid the pregnancy. Because if the Egyptian soldiers see that she is pregnant, they're going to follow up on that. By command, they need to follow up on that. All right, was it a boy? We need to take the boy. He goes to the river. And so they didn't know. She seems to have hidden the pregnancy, and then will be right back out there working again, expected to fulfill her quotas. And so she is hiding him on her person while she is out working. Well, that works okay in the first few weeks, in the first month. He's growing, though, and he continues to grow, and eventually he's 3 months old. He's heavy, and he's big, and she can't hide him anymore. And so what's she going to do at that point? It becomes too difficult to hide him. And so in verse 3, it says, when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. So how many that was the solution you were going to come up with? Right? That seems odd to us. How could she just stick them in a basket and go put them afloat on the Nile River? Right? That doesn't seem like a solution. Let me answer the question, how could she do that? By asking a series of, I believe, related questions. Why did Noah build a huge boat in his backyard? What motivated Abraham to bind Isaac, his son, and to take him as a sacrifice? How could Caleb tell the Israelites to go into a land that was filled with armies greater than what the Israelites had? How could Hannah willingly drop Samuel off at the temple to be raised by Eli? And there's a host of other questions that I think fit in the same vein. And the answer to every one of those questions is faith. Faith is how they do these things. And so if she keeps him with her, you know what happens, right? He dies. He will be discovered and he dies. And who knows what happens to the rest of the family as well, because they have conspired against the king of Egypt. And so was this her plan? Was it God's plan? I don't know who came up with the plan. There's no indication that God revealed this to her. So maybe this was her and her husband who devised the plan. But what I do know is that there was a plan. It's not just haphazard, well, we'll just go throw him out on the river and see if he survives. That's not what happened. He wasn't desperately sent out into the current in a basket. He's laid among the reeds at the edge of the river. There's forethought and planning to this. He wasn't set out where he was in danger. He was actually set in the area where the princess was going to come and bathe. There was forethought that was put into this. He was in no danger at any time. And in fact, there's somebody close by who loves him, who's watching. Miriam. I believe the timing was likely set to coincide with when the princess shows up to the river's edge. That he wasn't there throughout the heat of a day or 2 days or 3 days. I suspect a great deal of planning went into this. Now, before we move on, we've only talked about her as Moses' mother. We haven't actually said her name yet, right? Her name is not mentioned here in Exodus chapter 2. When you get to chapter 6, the name of the parents is mentioned there. She is Jochebed, and the father is Amram. Jochebed, what an amazing name. Literally, her name means Yahweh is glory, or God is glorified. And her father gave her this wonderful name, and then her actions glorify Jehovah. She has shown faith in God, and she is trusting that God is going to work things out. Incidentally, her husband's name I mentioned was Amram. His name means an exalted people. So that's about Israel. Here they are. They're in captivity in Egypt, and yet his father saw fit to exalt the people. We are an exalted people despite the situation that we're in. So these two, Amram and Jochebed, Hebrews 11, they're over in that chapter. Not by name. We don't find their names there. But Hebrews 11, remember what the chapter is about. This is the hall of faith. These are people who demonstrated just amazing faith in God. Hebrews 11, verse 23, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's command. Their faith is written down and preserved for history, that we all might know. And so they hid the child for 3 months. That was an act of faith. Placing him in the basket in the river, that was also an act of faith. It was not desperation. They were executing a plan and doing so trusting in God's providence, that God will work things out. All right, so we'll have more to say on Jochebed in a bit, but let's move on into chapter 2 and at verse 4 through 6. So chapter 2, verse 4, it says, his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. So first of all, let's give commendation where it is due. Miriam is dutifully watching over her baby brother. She's not off doing something else. She knows that this is serious stuff and that his life hangs in the balance. And so she is there at a distance, far enough away that, she's not hovering over the basket. And yet she is keeping an eye on him to make sure that he is safe. And so good for her to be doing that. It's likely that Pharaoh's daughter had a custom of bathing at this particular location at a certain time. And so, I think that's why they're able to orchestrate this in the way that they did. She sees a woven basket. Well, that wasn't there last time I was here. And so she has one of her maidens go and grab the basket. And I don't know what she expected to find inside of the basket. I doubt she expected to find a baby. But that is what was inside the basket, there is a little baby. She opens up the basket, the baby weeps, and she realizes immediately this is a Hebrew baby. Now, there might be a little bit difference in skin color, although I don't think that it's excessively so among them. There might be a little bit difference in facial structure and so forth, but again, I don't know that it's excessively so. But this is a baby boy. Why is a baby boy not with his mom if this is an Egyptian baby? And so immediately she understands this is one of the Hebrew children. Somebody has saved this child so that he is not put to death. Her father has commanded all of his people to put these children to death. She does not. She has the opportunity. In fact, I would suggest to you, she has the responsibility, given what her father has said. She also disobeyed her father. She does no harm to the child. She does not command anyone else to do harm to the child. They're right at the river, right? Couldn't be easier. But there is no way that she will allow that to happen. It is believed by many scholars that Pharaoh's daughter was barren. She was unable to have children. And therefore, what we're told in the text in verse 6 is that she was moved with compassion. She saw this baby boy and he is helpless, and she has compassion on him. And she, in fact, is moved with zeal for the child. And we see that as we go forward. Now, it's reasonable to think that at some point, either she or someone else, I suspect she, told Pharaoh about this child. Eventually, he's going to realize he's got a grandson, right? Where'd he come from? And so we don't have the record of the conversation, but I suspect that she's the one who likely had brought the origin of the child to her father's understanding that this is a Hebrew child. And evidently, he consented to allow the child to live because Moses lived. He didn't get cast into the river like he was supposed to be. But not only to live, but to become Pharaoh's daughter's son. So she is now his adopted mom, which means that Pharaoh is his adopted grandfather. The guy who wanted him and everyone else like him dead now does goo goo gaga with this little guy. I don't know if the pharaohs did that or not. Anyhow, but this is now his grandson. So at this point, Miriam steps into action. And again, she may have instructions from her mom on what to do when Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby. She comes up, she says, verse 7, shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women that she may nurse the child for you? You want someone to take care of feeding the baby? And the princess, she's unable to nurse, right? She's barren. She can't nurse the child. But there are a whole lot of distraught Hebrew women who have active mammary glands and yet no children to feed. And so, shall we go find somebody to feed the baby? I think Miriam's question reveals the plan that Jochebed had. That it was intended that Pharaoh's daughter discover the child, and perhaps they knew her character and they perceived that she would be compassionate and that this was an opportunity to let him live. I don't know that the plan was that he would come back to their home. I don't I'm not sure that they were that presumptuous in the plan. But he's going to live. That's the focus of the plan. And so look at what happens in verse 8. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the mother took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." So the end here is perhaps greater than what they had thought would happen. Right? Pharaoh's daughter agrees, yeah, we need to get somebody who's going to feed the baby, and she's intrigued and excited about the child and wants to raise the child, but I can't feed him, so I need somebody to step in during the meantime. And of course, who's Miriam going to go and get? Her mom, the baby's mom. And so Jochebed is the obvious choice. And you know that Amram and Jochebed, they have been praying that God will take care of the little one, and he brings him right back to their house. Not just for a moment either. They walked out of their house with him in a basket and put him in a river because he was getting too big to hide anymore, and his life was in danger. And now he is back in their house with the protection of Pharaoh. Nothing can happen to this baby. No one can touch him. You remember Ephesians 3 and verse 20, that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think? I think this is one of those circumstances where they were just looking for the baby's got to live. And God says, yeah, the baby's got to live, and he's going to live in your house. And he brings the baby back to them. Beyond that, she's getting paid. Not only is she continuing in life with her son, she's getting paid by Pharaoh's daughter to feed Moses. Keep in mind, they are slaves. That sets them apart. That helps them out. They are not going to starve because now they are on the payroll of Egypt. God's providence is wonderful. All right, so let's come back to Jochebed. And she continues to nurse the child until he is weaned, at which point that's when she has to deliver him back to Pharaoh's daughter. She has no choice in the matter. Now, how old was he then? How long did Jochebed and Amram have the child in their home? Today, it's typical for children to be weaned somewhere in the range of 6 to 12 months, somewhere in that range. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but that's the typical range. Anthropologist Kathy Detweiler suggests that the natural range for weaning in ancient times was between 2.5 and 7 years. I have heard some that state it goes even beyond 7 years. But we will use her numbers. And so he was weaned 2.5 at the earliest, but I suspect that they continued to feed him much longer than that. I don't know if it was 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, if it was up to the 7 years. I don't know exactly how long. But I know that Jochebed is doing more than just feeding him. She is also teaching him. She is talking to him about their people, about who he is, that he is a Hebrew, that they serve the God of creation. And so his little mind is being filled up with knowledge of God and of God's people. And then the day comes when he is weaned and he is delivered to go to the home of Pharaoh's daughter. It was an emotional time, I have no doubt about that. It's a day of heartbreak and sorrow for Jochebed, and yet her son lives. Her actions preserved his life, prepared him for his future, And now he goes to be with his adopted mom. Would Jochebed and Amram see Moses again? I don't know. There's nothing that tells us. We do know that he reconnects with his brother and with his sister, albeit he's 80 years old when he does that. Did they know each other before that time? Maybe. Was there some interaction before then? Maybe. I don't know. We also know that the teachings that his mother and his father had given him stuck. Because look at chapter 2 and at verse 11. Now, it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. He's not going out to the Egyptians and looking at what's going on with the Egyptians. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Moses knows I am a Hebrew. These are my people out here, these ones who are being oppressed. And so the teaching stuck. Train up a child in the way that he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. Back to Pharaoh's daughter once more. Verse 10 said he became her son, and that she called his name Moses because I drew him out of the water. How much interaction was there between Pharaoh's daughter and Jochebed during those years? I don't know. We're just not told about it. I don't think that she just sort of washed her hands of the situation. All right, we'll see you when he's 7. And then waited for them to show up. I'm sure that a relationship has been kindled and has been brought along in all of that. And when she names him, the name, in fact, deals with the day she found him. I drew him out of the water. I'm going to call him Moses because he was drawn out of the water. And verse 10, speaking about the naming, I don't think that this is 2 years down the road, 4 years down the road. When he's 7, he finally gets a name. Everybody just called him baby before that, right? I think this happened early on that he was named this. And again, the name means to be drawn out. What's interesting is the name Egyptian or is it Hebrew? It's both. It's both. It is from the Hebrew word mesh, or mez, which is drawn out, from the Hebrew word, which is Moshe, which is to draw or to rescue. It's a combination of both. And so he is Moses, Moshes, which is really neat. We don't know very much about Pharaoh's daughter and her bringing him up. I know that she wanted a better life for him. That's what mothers want for their children. I know that his needs were met and beyond because he's Pharaoh's grandson. We're also told that he was given all kinds of education. Acts chapter 7, verse 22, Moses was learned in all the wisdom of Egypt and was mighty in words and deeds. Now, I don't think the princess is the instructor here, but she supports him in this and she's encouraging him in his studies. And the time that he spent among the Egyptians helped to prepare him for when he would come back and face the Egyptians as the leader of Israel. You see God's hand working in it, right? So he's not just a slave who grew up among slaves and somehow has to learn how to rise up and be a leader. He was given over to Pharaoh's daughter so that he would learn the wisdom of Egypt and he would become mighty in words and deeds so that God could then use him to lead his people away from Egyptian captivity. As much as her own barrenness may have been a factor in her decision to take Moses in and raise him as her own son, the fact remains she was moved with compassion. She was moved out of love for this child that he won a place in her heart right away and throughout the rest of his lifetime. When we look at the record of Moses' life, Now, we stayed in a very tight area here for our study today because there's not a lot told to us about his early years and his relationships with his moms. He's got two. We don't have a whole lot. It gets overlooked. But may I suggest to you, both of these women were important in his life. Both of them loved him and sought the best for him. As little as mentioned of them, there are great lessons inside these women. And so, ladies, whatever your role in the lives of little ones, whether it is as mom or as a mom-like figure, thank you. Perhaps like Shiphrah and Puah, you have a passion and a love for children in general. They stood as guardians for many young Hebrew boys who would have otherwise been killed by the tyranny of Egypt. And they stood up against that. They were the voice for many children who had no voice for themselves. And children today need that same kind of thing. People who are willing to step in and be a voice and be an influence and be a guidance. Jochebed, she was in a difficult circumstance, but we see that her exceptional love for him and devotion for him caused her to do what was in his best interest. Every mother faces different challenges and trials in life. And to those who are mothers among us, thank you for your perseverance to continue to show devotion to your children, even in those difficult times. Faith in God was a huge motivator for Jochebed and her resolute protection of Moses. She made an exceptionally agonizing decision. That was not an easy decision to go put him in a basket out on the river. But she did so because she loved her son and she trusted God. And so, ladies, make decisions that are in the best interest of your children with confidence that God is going to bless you and bless your children. In most families, there is a relationship, biological relationship between mom and child, but not in all. Pharaoh's daughter became Moses' mom. She was an adopted mom. Her first reaction was compassion and love and kindness and tenderness because she loved this child who just caught her heart. And by stepping in as she did, Moses' life was saved. If she does not step in, Moses dies. She stepped in where Moses needed her. And so to those who are adoptive moms, what a special role. Things, for whatever reason, in the biological family did not work, would not work, could not work. And so adoptive moms fill a special role. They are no less than a biological mom. They are a mom. They rise to the same duties and the same obligations. They experience the same joys and the same sorrows. They have the same dedication and the same affection. And so may we be thankful for moms. To the children who are among us, be thankful to your mom. Do good to your mom. Listen to your mom. Respect them and honor them and hold them in high esteem because indeed they are a gift from God. If we can help you in your walk with the Lord today, we want to do that. If we can be praying for you, what can we pray for you? We can be studying. Tell us what can we open up and how can we encourage and help build your faith. So thankful for the local church here and for each one. And I want to see all of us growing in faith. And so if we can help you in some way, let us know as we stand together and sing.